I have to extend a mahalo to Ku'iipo. Ku'iipo, where are you? She's the one that put all of this together, right over there in that corner. And some of the things that I guess we need to take care of before we start. There, where Ku'iipo is sitting in the back corner, she's got information on the Maui film maps, and I encourage you guys to go over there. Also, she has a little kokua bowl because it's the Maui film maps that sponsored this. And so whatever you guys can do to help out, that would be great. Okay. And in addition to that, there's Mea Ai over in the corner over there that Ku'iipo and her friends and gang Ohana put together for all of us. So you feel free to go throughout the evening and enjoy yourself, enjoy the Mea Ai that they prepared. Before we start, I'd like to call up Le'ohu Ryder to open with a pule.
Aloha. Let's take a breath and open up. In the name of Aloha, with grace and gratitude, we flower in the new bloom as the seas, the changes come, and the winds call the names of the ancestors. We are imbued with the grace of this land and the stories, and the iwis that are restoring us into authentic expressions of aloha. And so this evening, we bring forward the rainbows of diversity, the leo, the no'eo, the pono, the aloha. And we say mahalo Maui, mahalo Hawaii, mahalo Keakua, for the brilliance, the shining, shimmering light of this now moment. We offer this pule in all forms, and may we swim deeply in the oceans that call. Amen.
Mahalo. Also in the back corner there, for those of you who haven't found your ohana on the Ku'e petition, we have Jocelyn and Claire and her gang in back there. And I encourage you, if you have ohana that you believe signed the Ku'e petition, go and check it out, because they have it listed by names, alphabetical order, and if you have ohana, they'll find it. And I did that for the first time 2 weeks ago when they were in Hilo, and it really blew me away with the information that they were able to provide, because I always wondered if my kupuna, my tutu man and tutu lady was on there, and they found my tutu man, David Malo, signing the Ku'e petition. And so I couldn't fail, but also sign the Ku'e petition also. So I encourage you, if you haven't checked out the Ku'e petition, please do so. And I'd like to have Jocelyn, Claire, if you could, come up on this side and kind of give people the information about what you guys are doing.
Hi, good evening. I'm Claire Pana, and this is Jocelyn Costa, and we started the Ku'e petition continues 1897 to present, just about a year ago, and it has taken us so many beautiful places within our people, within their families and ohana. I never really knew how much we were related until we did this database. And I hear people say, oh, my family is this, and my family is this, and I'm going, we really are all related, because I keep hearing all the names, and people who don't know who each other are, and they are the same family. And I think this, in a way, unites us all together as people, and we get to experience it. It's so beautiful. But we really wanted to let you know why we're here and how to come back to the tables and find your kupuna, and then to join them and support them by signing the petition. So I'm going to let Jocelyn speak.
Aloha. One of the reasons why this came to awareness is a year ago, the DOI came, and then they left. And everybody was like, well, what now? What do we do? What do we say? Who do we talk to? And we started doing some, continuing the conversation. And from there, we understood that the people were wanting to be able to be proactive. And I don't see anything more than what they can do, which is align themselves with their kingdom, and more so with their kupuna. And as we started to do this, I thought, it'll be wonderful. They'll find their kupuna, and they can breathe life back into the kupuna that's been waiting for us. But what I have witnessed is, when they find their names in the database, and they open the Ku'e petition book for the first time and see their kupuna's signature, they do this. So instead, the kupuna breathes awareness, consciousness, and life back into us. We're the ones sleeping. We didn't have all the information needed, and they're giving it to us just from that one breath when we take in, when we find them. And it'll transform you into a different level. People want to find their kupuna. People want to call their tutu, never talk for a long time. They want to know the stories. They want to know more about their family. They want to know more names. So I encourage you, if at the very least, go and look at the books. At very best, sign the petition. Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Mahalo. I'd like to get started, because this is why all of you have come tonight, to get information and to see what is happening currently and to try to understand what's taking place. I'd like to introduce my guests on the panel tonight. To my far right, I have Professor Kaleikoa, and he's here at Maui, Maui College, and a professor there. All of you know about Kaleikoa. And to my left, I have Kaho'okahi Kanuha, who is a kumu at Ahapunana Leo in Kona, and he has been leading the charge up at Mauna Kea. And we have Kaleikoa, who's been leading the charge up at Haleakala. It's very, very interesting, and about a hand for these two guys. And to my right, sitting right next to me, I have Dr. Keanu. And I believe that this man is responsible for the education and all the information that we have today that we're now using because of the research that he started way back in the 1990s. And the diligence that he showed to get people educated. And the end result is you're seeing it today, and it continues. Dr. Keanu. My name is Kale Gumapac, and I'm the CEO for Laulima Title Search and Claims. And I'm very proud of all of our clients that we have that are part of Laulima Title Search and Claims, because we have laid the foundation for the legal arguments that are now taking place. And if you would like to know more, come and talk to me afterwards. But I'd like to start tonight with what has happened in the last couple of days, especially here on Maui at Punene, because I got a Facebook message that night and saying live stream, and I was wondering, what, live stream? And who I see Kaleikoa lying on the ground, and I'm going, what is going on? And this is where the arrests were taking place. And I'd like to get Kaleikoa's manao in regards to that, and why, and what the goal was in doing that.
Velina me ke aloha, ano ai. E te hopo atani e te mauliola, yola hoi o mauliola, yola ia o e tani tuminun oia ho oia e ola. Okay, wow. Velina, aloha. Aloha. And first I'd just like to say I'm really not at all the organizer in the efforts in regards to what's been going on with the construction of telescopes. And these were telescopes on Haleakala. But first of all, we got to give our hats off to Kilo Haleakala back there. And Uncle Ed Lindsay, peace on him. Ki Opi Raymond, Timika Hala, and the whole gang. For over the last decade, fighting in the courts in regards to the protection of our mauna. And we have to use that language, our mauna. For far too long, we've been taught to somehow believe that mauna has become their mauna. But really, for me, that's really what the struggle is all about. Also, I think Trinette is out there. Where is Trinette? Somewhere out there. Yeah, she's kind of been really, Fertile has been a lot of the groundwork along with Kahele Duklo, my boss, the family over there. I'm just a soldier in a sense in all of this. But there are many people, many hands who've been involved in organizing this effort in education. So as I said, the Haleakala has been going on over 10 years. I've been involved with some of the mountain issues since, I think the first time I was arrested was in 1999 at UH Manoa, where the Board of Regents meeting was being held to make a master plan for Mauna Kea back then. And make a long story short, there were attempts to kind of keep our students out of the room, and we students demanded a space in the room, and we forced our way in, and had a nice wrestling match, I guess, with some of the security forces that day. So myself personally, it's been about 15 years directly in regards to the mountains, and it's the same story. In 1999. The University of Hawaii, we've got to understand the University of Hawaii's role in all of this. And I'll say it proudly. University of Hawaii is a racist institution. Although I'm a faculty member, we have to recognize the truth. And I use this word racism in a very clear understanding of the meaning of the word. It's based on the fact, first of all, that we know our mountaintops belong to our people, have always belonged to our people. We've never given consent to the taking of the mountains, never. And as I challenge other professors, all you got to do is show me the pala that shows that our people ever gave consent to the taking of the mountains. We've never. We've always opposed what has been going on those mountains. Secondly, we understand that whether it's the DLNR or the Board of Land and Natural Resources on Mauna Kea, which issues leases to people all over the world outside of Hawaii, or it's the University of Hawaii, through 1961 executive order, Governor Quinn, who supposedly passed on through an executive order to the University of Hawaii to manage so-called Science City for the development of telescopes on Haleakala. It was never done with the consent of our people. So we know factually, truthfully, without hesitation, that those mountaintops belong, part of our national lands, and belongs to our people. Not just morally, but I'm talking factually. So that's why it's also important we talk about these issues, that we understand, it's not, the desecration is part of the whole issue. But the reason that desecration is going on is because we lack the control over that mountains. And the reason we lack the control of those mountains is because the state of Hawaii and the University of Hawaii purposely ignore the history and selectively ignore our rights, our human rights, our humanity as a people. And then one of the things I always say, what should be determined to happen on that mountain belongs to our people. Simply. And you heard me say this many times, no consent, no title, of course, no treaty, therefore no TMT. That's our mountain, first of all. And we must behave as if it is our mountain. We must remind them and tell them and teach them that it is our mountain. And first of all, we must teach one another. It's the education of ourselves to open up our minds in our own language when we talk about these mountains, to talk about these mountains as our mountains. I don't want this legacy being fought over by my children or my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren. I want this legacy to be understood today, that we must unite today. And the first step in this legacy, of course, is education, to understand the history of those mountains. And so, as we all know what happened last week, really for us, for our people, we have no choice. As I said, we have no choice but to fight back at this point. I don't want to fight. I don't want to lay on the ground. I don't want to put myself in that situation. But I do know if we do not resist, they will continue to treat us as if we're not human beings. It's only us, by our own doing, that we can recognize ourselves first as human beings and then act as human beings. And to act as a human being is to first proclaim to the world that we are a people, that mountain belongs to us, that we've never given consent up to the mountain, and that mountain is a special and sacred place to our people. See, all peoples have sacred places. All peoples. See, they try to make up this BS like, oh, you Hawaiians are just so sensitive. You hear that? All the time. You're just extra sensitive. And I remember I was with the national parks. I was on one of the advisory councils one time. And I think it was in Maryland, Paris back then when in the national parks, maybe about 8, 9, 10 years ago. And she just turned to me, she said, well, Kaleikoa, what would you do? And I said, simple. First step. And I'm not talking about the telescopes now, I'm talking about the national parks, but it's the same idea. And I said, first step, the same rules you have at the Arizona Memorial, let's have the same rules at Haleakala. They're both national parks. They're both sacred spaces. And of course, she kind of freaked out by saying, well, if we do this, then we cannot do this. I said, exactly. See, that's the point. I understand there's a hypocrisy here. There's contradictions here. The American Haole world has sacred spaces. They definitely do. But native worlds are treated in a very different manner. And so for me, part of this is for our peoples to first recognize this and to understand this. There is a treatment against native peoples is one that they treat us in an inhuman manner. And the only way we gain our humanity back is, first of all, we as a people must stand as human beings to demand our place in the sun, to demand our rights to be recognized. Like all peoples. I'm not asking more than anybody else out there. I think all peoples understand there are special places that need to be protected and guided. And so that's really, I think, what happened in the last few weeks in regards to Haleakala. And, before I keep on talking more, just to say that, there'll be another convoy coming up next month. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen, but I do know another convoy is coming. So we have a month to plan and a month to commit ourselves. So stop before I keep on going. I won't tag out. So.
Several weeks ago, Kaho'okahi and Dr. Sai went to Canada, and Kaho'okahi filed a complaint for war crimes with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police War Crimes Unit, I think. Yeah, it was an sensitive investigation unit. And so, Kaho'okahi, what was I know you filed the complaint, what were you looking to accomplish on that, and where are you at today?
Aloha kako. First of all, mahalo nui for having me, inviting me to be here in Maui. Nice to be here, so mahalo to everyone for coming out. In regards to the war crimes, we went up in early May. I think it was May 13th that we filed the complaint. We were there for a few days, and we went to the Canadian Department of Justice Sensitive Investigations section, or Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes section, trying to, again, get these war crime complaints and reports in. They gave us a little bit of the runaround over there. Eventually, though, to make a long story and lots of traveling short, we made it to the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and we got into the, the International, International Division. National Division. And so they have within that, they have the crimes for, or the section for war crimes. We met with 2 officers there, and we were able to get the complaints in, and they accepted it, and they assured us that they would perform a preliminary inquiry into these complaints and these reports. And so actually just about an hour ago, I found out, a few days ago, Dr. Sai and Dexter, who will be here later, they got a letter saying that a preliminary inquiry has been done. And so there's things to follow through up with that. But essentially what we're trying to do is, one, get this into the international arena. It already is, in a sense, looking at social media and things like that, but how closely are these other governments, are these other entities looking at this situation? How closely are they looking at their involvement in this? How much do they know in regards to how liable they are and can be for the actions and really the crimes that are taking place in Hawaii? So that's the one thing. And 2, I think to legitimize and authenticate, in a sense, not for us, but for those on the outside looking in, our arguments. And we've been saying on Mauna Kea since the very beginning, you can look at the signs and the crosswalk pictures, territory of the Hawaiian Kingdom, Hawaiian nationals. It's not the state of Hawaii. There is no treaty. There is no consent. There is no title. There will be no TMT. We've been saying these things from the very beginning. So it's one way, and a lot of people are going to look at that on the outside and think, these buggers is kind of stupid. Hawaii's been a state since 1959, da-da-da-da-da-da. So they don't know. So to get another country, one who's essentially involved in this project, to recognize and to accept these complaints, basically says that they cannot deny that we are not, or that they cannot deny that we're not a part of the United States of America. They cannot deny that Hawaii is still a sovereign, independent country under an illegal and prolonged occupation. So on that end, I think that's recognized, that's noticed. And then as far as the procedural stuff, again, we have really not too much to do with that. They follow their procedures. So far they have. There's some work for us to do in response, and then they move forward again. But at this point, I think it's looking good. I think what we went up there to do, we got accomplished, and we'll see how it plays out in the future.
Malo. Keanu, can you expand on that and also tie that into what this means for everybody out here?
Okay, so this process of education it's multifaceted, it's multi-level. You have children that learn, you have makua that learn, you have kupuna that learn, you have governments that learn. Every entity is at a different, hey, Dex, come on.
You're up here, Dexter. No hiding in the back there.
That's your seat over here.
We know you went to eat before you came.
So whenever you talk, how can I explain this? If I'm trying to explain something to my uncle about sovereignty, government, political systems, I need to find a way that my uncle can understand. Yeah, so I got to speak a different language, but I'm still speaking the same facts. Yeah, a different style. Okay, I learned that growing up in a Hawaiian family. Okay, it's called respect for your kupuna. How you present it. And I remember my dad would tell me that the mo'o never changes shape, but it can change color. Okay, so when you with green people, you talk green. When you with brown people, you talk brown. When you with white people, you speak white. Yeah. I kind of learned that when I was in the Army. Yeah. I also learned that when I was at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in the Netherlands, arguing a case up there. You got to use different languages to get the point across. What was crucial in this case with Kaho'okahi and the war crimes, right off the bat, when you mention war crimes, it's like getting hit in the mouth. Like, what? War crimes? Where's the war? Where's the mass murder? Where's the weapons firing? Okay. Well, to fire weapons at each other, okay, to kill each other, does not necessarily mean that's the only way war crimes can be committed, because war crimes are specific. Like theft is a particular crime. Murder is a particular crime. Well, under war crimes, you have deprivation of a fair trial. That's a war crime. You have destruction of property. That's a war crime. You have unlawful appropriation of property. That's a war crime. You have pillaging, which is the international word for robbery. That's a war crime. So everything is specific, yeah? So when we're going to be approaching Canada, see, I know this area like the back of my hand because that's my background. That's my expertise. That's what I do, okay? But how do I convey that information on behalf of Dexter Kaiama to assist him in representing Kaho'okahi and the war crime of unlawful confinement, okay? What I needed to do was I needed to assume that the RCMP and the War Crimes Unit of Canada knows nothing about Hawaii. In their eyes, Hawaii is a part of the United States. I need to work off that premise. Yeah? And then what you do is you address each point with a question, and then you follow with the answer. But when you're talking to a legal entity, an entity that prosecutes individuals with the purpose of convictions, you need to speak that language to them. Yeah? So you not only got to speak from Hawaii, but you got to speak through the language that they can understand. So I basically had to set up a brief, and it was like 2 binders of information. The first question that I needed to pose and answer in the affirmative in order to move to the next question, because I'm going to be walking this War Crimes Unit to the natural conclusion. But you got to start off with the first one. That first one was, did the Hawaiian Kingdom exist as a country under international law? That's the first question that you got to be answered in the affirmative. And that's not a statement. You got to prove it. Okay? Well, Hawaii was recognized as an independent state since 1843. Anglo-French proclamation, the British and the French. Okay? And then by 1893, we had over 90 embassies and consulates all over the world. Clearly, Hawaii was a full member of the international community, full member. In fact, Lili'uokalani, as princess, and Queen Kapiolani traveled to Queen Victoria's Jubilee in 1887. And they were sitting way in the front, because the way you are positioned as far as monarchies is how long is your genealogy of that monarchy. And the Hawaiian Kingdom's genealogy actually goes back to 1200 AD. And that is basically how they line up monarchies. Yeah? And did you know republics, like the United States, they were sitting way in the back because they was brand new in the eyes of the monarchies. Yeah? They started in 1776 as opposed to 1200. Okay? So, also the Permanent Court of Arbitration in the Netherlands in 2001, in its arbitration award, specifically said that the Hawaiian Kingdom in the 19th century existed as an independent state. It specifically said that. So once you answer that, then you move to the next question. Does the Hawaiian Kingdom continue to exist despite its government being overthrown in 1893? And then you need to explain through legal citations and theory that a country exists despite its government being overthrown. Yeah, so like Iraq. The Iraqi government was overthrown by the United States, but did not equate to Iraq disappearing. It was still a country, but it's called occupation. So you explain, yes, the Hawaiian Kingdom as a country still exists despite the overthrow of its government. The third question, because the Hawaiian Kingdom continues to exist, does the Hawaiian Kingdom have a treaty with Canada? And Canada is one of the Commonwealth realms, the British Commonwealth, 16 of them, including Great Britain, where the treaties that existed prior to these Commonwealths having self-governance, those treaties apply as it would in Canada. So that's the 1851 Hawaiian-British Treaty. And then, next question, are war crimes being committed in the Hawaiian Islands? And that's when you got to break down every single war crime and the evidence. Unlawful appropriation of property, unlawful confinement, denationalization, and you got to lay it out with the evidence. And then, the final question, does Canada have the legal authority to prosecute war crimes committed outside of Canada in Hawaii? So this is what Kaho'okahi and I went up with, because Dexter and I put it together. Dexter drafted the complaint, and I drafted a supplemental report with all this detailed information. And at first, as Kaho'okahi said, when we were given the runaround, what he meant was we couldn't find this unit. I mean, we was in the taxi going all over the place like, is this a Hawaiian? And we just going, what's happening? And then we finally went to the right place. And that right place was actually right down the road from our hotel, but was traveling 30 minutes outside of our hotel to go to their version of the FBI, I think. Yeah. But once we got there, typically, you can tell that these constables, these mounted police officers that are from the war crime unit, they were asking specific questions. Like, where's the international armed conflict? Where's the war? My response was, you don't need a war. You can be occupied even without resistance during a war. Spanish-American War, that was Hawaii. Article 2, Geneva Convention. And then once you say that, you can see them kind of acknowledge like, oh, okay. Then he says, who's the victim? And that's when we talked about Kaho'okahi, and Kaho'okahi just explained everything. The unlawful confinement, the arrests, TMT. One of the members of TMT is a Canadian astronomy group, okay? That's the link to Canada, okay? And then one of the constables said, yeah, but Hawaii's a part of the United States. I said, no, I understand that position you're taking, because I would too, because if that's all I knew, yeah, I would assume. But this packet has the information that can be understood. And then he goes, okay. And he says, but we have to respect the U.S.-American treaty. And I said, absolutely, you have to respect the U.S.-American treaty, but it doesn't apply to Hawaii. It's the 1851 Hawaiian-British Treaty that applies here with Canada. And you can see them, like, the first day, just a lot of information. I said, all we need you to do is to pass on this information to your war crimes unit in the Department of Justice. Don't try to figure it out here. You guys are police officers. This is complicated. Okay. Well, I can tell you that Dexter received a letter from the RCMP mid-July, last month. The only thing they're saying, because I can't get into any details because it's still developing, the only thing they're saying is they're not saying Hawaii is a part of the United States. They're not saying war crimes are not being committed. All they're saying is you haven't satisfactorily defined who's the perpetrator and who's the victim. Because under the statute, the victim has to be Canadian. So Kaho'okahi isn't Canadian. We should have got you naturalized when we was up there. Nah.
Go marry somebody.
Go marry somebody.
Wait, I think we can find somebody. Don't worry about it.
Marry one Canadian.
But it says,
A little Kanaka, eh?
but it says the perpetrator, which I'm not going to get into, the perpetrator must be clearly stated. Okay? And when you talk about a perpetrator of war crimes, you always have the element of awareness. You cannot just accuse somebody of a war crime. They have to know that what they're doing is wrong. Yeah? It's called criminal intent. You got to show intent. Now, you can show negligence, Yeah, the guy didn't know, but he's still responsible. But for a war crime, you got to show that they had prior knowledge of the situation. And we're going to be discussing this between myself, Dexter, and Kaho'okahi for the next step. But reading this letter coming out of a governmental unit, you would have thought they would have said what those two police officers were trying to convey to us in that room, that, no, but Hawaii's a part of the United States. Nothing. All they're talking about is the victim and the perpetrator. That's what we need. Until then, we don't have jurisdiction to prosecute. And one thing that Canada does have, for the person or persons responsible for committing the war crimes here in Hawaii, and they're still in Hawaii, according to Canadian law, investigation and prosecution can commence even if they're not in Canada. That is a little twist on that Canadian statute. Okay? So these are the kind of things that are taking place where the international community is now becoming aware of what's happening in Hawaii. It's because our people have stood up. It's because our people are resisting and showing no. But how do you translate that to somebody in Canada? It's called a war crime. So now all of a sudden, what happened to Kaho'okahi and Kaleikoa, what you have there is unlawful confinement. That's a war crime. And it's all on YouTube. Yeah? What you also have is now moving toward an unfair trial because this court cannot legally exist if Hawaii is occupied. That's another war crime that is covered by these countries. So it appears that what's happening is the governments, not the world, but the governments are beginning to look at Hawaii through a very different lens, because if Hawaii is occupied, it's not just Native Hawaiians that are affected by that situation. It would also include every Canadian that has come through Hawaii, that has paid taxes, that has maybe been deprived coming here because they overstayed a visa. Now that becomes a very big problem. It becomes a problem for Canadians who are doing business in Hawaii from Canada. Now the same thing would apply to the Switzerland. The same thing would apply to New Zealand. And you have over 130 countries that have similar statutes, war crime statutes, that Canada and Switzerland has, as well as New Zealand. But we're still at that stage of education. It's a slow process to unravel this net that's just been tangled. Yeah? And sometimes it's tempting to just cut them, right? But you got to be patient. That's what I was told. Just be patient. So my uncle would say, just keep playing with it. And then all of a sudden, rah, comes off. That net that was all tight and twisted. And everything that we are doing is slowly unraveling that tangle. And a lot of times that tangling of the net is because of ourselves further tangling it. Through not being educated. Through not knowing. So it behooves every one of us, and especially myself, I always check myself. Is this the right way to see it? And it's not what I see. For myself, when I work with people, people may see me only out in the front because only Keanu's there. I have a lot of people, and Kaleikoa and Kaho'okahi and Kale and others know. Oh, I consult with a lot of people. Law professors, yeah? Other PhDs that have done research in certain areas. Even Judge Walter Heen, dealing with the court cases and what Dexter is arguing. We actually met and discussed this with the author at the Intermediate Court of Appeals about his decision called State of Hawaii versus Lorenzo. So we're not creating this idea that this is how it works. It's actually trying to understand how that tangling actually took place in order to address it. But it takes a lot of time. Sometimes it's hard. You sit there and you see a lot of people get hurt, and you're going, come on, hurry up. But still, you just got to take your time. Yeah? And I think what everybody's doing is a part of that untangling. Part of that untangling.
Dexter, yo manao on this.
Yeah, how's it, Kaleikoa? First off, kalamai for being a little bit late. But thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here in Maui. Honored to be here among our heroes, our courageous people throughout the land. I was away when the recent arrest happened here on Maui, and it was heartbreaking, but at the same time inspiring to know that we have heroes here, and we have heroes throughout all our lands. And let me just start to say that we continue to need more heroes. And I think it is this enlightenment that we're going through, this information that is, of course, compelling us to act in a way we need to act. And we need to continue to act that way. We need to continue to bring this information. We need to continue to challenge the oppressor. We need to continue to put forth that this is illegal occupation and the United States does not belong here. And we need to continue to make that challenge. And I'm so happy and I'm so proud as a Kanaka to be part of you and part of this whole group of people who are heroes. And so it makes me proud to be here. Thank you. Let me just tell you that tomorrow morning I have a motion before Judge Cardozo, and it concerns the Molokai fishermen's case, and it's all related. And the motion that I have before him is a motion to certify his order denying my motion to dismiss. As you know, I previously filed a motion to dismiss the criminal complaint saying that they did not have subject matter jurisdiction. The court didn't. Again, that because we were under illegal occupation, this court is illegally constituted. And that's where a lot of you have become aware that the judge took judicial notice of Dr. Sai's testimony in court, qualified him as an expert witness, and also accepted his expert memorandum brief. Now, you may have heard different versions of this, but technically speaking, in the court of law, when the court takes judicial notice of something, it is what the court is saying is that fact that you presented is undisputed. So the inconsistency of accepting all of that information and taking judicial notice of all that information and then ruling against us is very much contrary to what it should be. You can't take notice of something being undisputed and then turn around and say, no, that doesn't, I don't agree with that. If you're going to do that, you need to do one of two things as a court. Not take judicial notice of it, or to dispute it, or to have the prosecutor dispute it. And as some of you know by now, the prosecutor never disputed any of the information that we provided. Because it was an evidentiary hearing, Dr. Sai's testimony was evidence. His qualification as an expert made it expert witness testimony that was part of the evidence. That memorandum is part of the evidence. So we provided all of that information to the court. And that met the burden of that state case, many of you know, State of Hawaii versus Lorenzo. And in State of Hawaii versus Lorenzo, court said Mr. Lorenzo lost because he failed to provide facts or evidence to conclude that the Hawaiian kingdom continues to exist. By the court taking judicial notice of Dr. Sai's testimony and his expert memorandum brief, we met the requirement of State of Hawaii versus Lorenzo. Once that requirement was met, the court was obligated to rule in our favor. It did not. Now, I know many of you know that we then tried to file a writ of mandamus because we wanted to take it up to the Supreme Court. We wanted that question answered. Well, the Supreme Court, of course, tried to punt. They didn't want to address the issue either. Right? So on a technicality, they denied our writ of mandamus. So upon further reflection, we said, okay, the next thing to do is have the judge certify the order so we can take it up on appeal again. So that's what's scheduled before Judge Cardozo tomorrow morning. It's not necessarily going to have any real large fanfare. And I think, because many other judges have asked me, when are we going to appeal this issue? So in my mind, there's no good reason for the judge to deny my motion tomorrow. Because he might want to know just as well where the court lies on this, where the appellate court lies on this. Because of course, as long as no appellate court decides on it, I'm going to always be back in the courts. I'm going to always be bugging Judge Cardozo, Judge Cahill, Judge Liu. So they might want to say, let's have the appellate courts decide it so we don't have to deal with Mr. Kaiama anymore. But I can't tell you what the court's going to rule, but in my mind, there's no good reason for the court to deny my motion. If that happens as it should happen, then the matter will be taken up on appeal. And we believe that we've got the court locked in on the legal issue. Now, quite frankly, I have some skepticism as well, as we all do, having dealt with the courts. And it's very possible that while we are correct on the law, they might find some way out. But we won't know until we get there. So that's what tomorrow's motion is scheduled for. So if the appellate courts eventually addresses the legal issue and says, yes, the Molokai fishermen, Kaiula English and Dudois, have met the legal requirements of State of Hawaii versus Lorenzo, then they are obligated to kick it back to Cardozo and say, Cardozo, you need to reverse your ruling. Should that happen, there's going to be a lot of consequences to that. That means there's a lot of cases out there that the court is saying, well, we didn't have jurisdiction over this, and the question was raised. The consequences of that is profound, though. The consequences of that. So it is the consequences of that kind of decision that may force the courts to try to find some way out of it. Again, I won't know that answer until we actually get there. But I just thought I'd let you know. And of course, that would have an impact on all these cases, on what Kaleikoa and their group decided to do, what was that, on the 20th of July? I mean, they would still approach the court with that same thing. You have no jurisdiction over this issue. So hopefully answering that question can help us in many ways as well. So I just thought I'd let you know that's what's happening tomorrow. So I think that kind of addresses some of the issues, not all of them. Okay.
One of the things that's very important for all of you to understand is that when we first started Laulima title searching claims, we were using these arguments, but we had to go out and educate the community in their own history first in order for us to try to apply what we were doing. Then once they got the history, but they didn't grab it. They just saw it as a way to try to protect their homes, period. And what happened was that we now started to file the motions to dismiss in the early years, about 5 years ago, that we started this. And there were a lot of people that thought we were crazy because we were filing the motions initially on the first cases based on the district courts not having jurisdiction as a result of the title to the property. Okay. And then the next thing that happened, we won the first 3 cases. Mine was one of them. Then they switched gears on us. Same information, same evidence. Now they said, you lose. Okay. So this is where we had to switch gears and now start to present a motion to dismiss based on subject matter jurisdiction. Several years ago, before everything took place. In the meantime, the Laulima clients were trying to grab onto this or trying to understand it, and every time that the court ruled against us, they'd say, oh, waste time, you guys lose. Because they didn't understand that we were laying the foundation in order to be able to have the evidence of war crimes that we're now taking to the international courts. Now everybody's talking about war crimes. But it was as a result of all of our Laulima clients that were able to jump in and hang in there with us as we argued the cases. Even though the courts ruled against us and in the favor of the banks. But now we're able to take all that evidence, and Keanu has put together some really interesting stats on what has taken place, and now we're going to be submitting it to the Swiss courts. It's very interesting to see how it has evolved to where we're at today from 4 years ago, little over 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, to where we're at today. It's like light speed that we're taking now compared to what has happened in the past 40 years. Okay? I just wanted to throw that in, a little bit.
I can add something. All of this playing in the court, it's almost like it's an inherent contradiction. Hawaii's occupied, Hawaiian Kingdom still exists, but Dexter got to go in and argue a case in a court that really doesn't exist, and I got to be there as an expert witness in a court that doesn't exist in order to get judicial notice under the rules of evidence. That's all illegal anyway. It is an inherent contradiction, and Dexter and I talk about it all the time. But it's part of that tangling of the net. You have to actually get into the net and start to untangle it. Because what does happen, and it was intentional, is the courts became another venue of education for the judges, the prosecutors, and everybody. Because now they're looking at real stuff. They're not looking at somebody screaming and yelling. They're dealing with a guy with a PhD. They're dealing with an attorney. They're dealing with a person that has title insurance that covers the debt of owed to the lender. I mean, every base is covered. And then they still come after because we're right, everything collapses. And one of the judges in Hilo said that. He said, if I grant Mr. Kaiama's motion to dismiss, I will commit political suicide, and I will say that all courts in Hawaii are illegal. He saw that. Now, because he didn't want to do that, then now the person who was in front of him, who was an elderly Japanese lady who had title insurance, gets screwed. That's a victim right there. And then it comes across as if Laulima and Dexter and me were wrong because it never worked. Wait a minute. In the last 4 years that we've been doing this, and I've read the transcripts and I've witnessed Dexter in the court, none of them have ever refuted the evidence. None. They just keep railroading. And that's what prompted this thing to just get bigger and bigger. So when they push, then we push back. And that's what escalated it to war crimes. Now we're going to other countries showing this information to them, because what you then have is a conspiracy to hurt people. That's what you actually see. And the problem is, everyone in the state of Hawaii, even though it's illegal, the state of Hawaii is the successor of the provisional government in 1893 that was controlled by insurgents. Greedy, treasonous people. But everybody today is all our family and friends who have inherited an illegal system but believe we're a government. And then all of a sudden you got Hawaiian police officers against Hawaiians when Hawaiians are saying, but this is the law. What you're starting to see there is a collision course that has consequences. And at every step of the way, Dexter and I always try to give them the benefit of the doubt. Always. But they love to throw punches back, so the only thing that Dexter and I got good at was dodging the punches. Because it's pretty much they telegraph. They punch so slow, you can see it coming a mile away. But they think it's real fast. But how do you still fix that problem? Well, there's something that happened that I want to share with you that I haven't told many people yet. The Swiss criminal court in Switzerland came out, and it's part of an investigative phase of criminal law. Switzerland operates very different from the United States and Great Britain. It's called a civil law tradition, as opposed to a common law tradition. There are different ways of operating. So if a prosecutor makes a decision not to stop investigating a crime, the person that's the victim has a right to object to that prosecutor's decision. And it goes through a 3-judge panel called the Federal Criminal Court Objections Chamber. Very unique. Yeah? Well, we filed paperwork there. Okay? 2 decisions came out, basically saying, restating the allegations of war crimes. Now, when you state allegations of war crimes and you name names, Governor Abercrombie, Lieutenant Governor Tsutsui, and the 2 directors of taxation, you don't just throw that into a court decision unless you have probable cause. Because if you do, that's called defamation of character. Yeah? That government is liable. They're calling somebody an alleged war criminal. They're restating what somebody said. Well, we went and followed through with another proceeding in the court. So we had a second decision that came out in June. The first one was in April. The second one reaffirmed everything again, but went further and even acknowledged that the Swiss consulate in Hawaii is not legal. They also said the treaty between the Hawaiian Kingdom and Switzerland was not canceled. That's heavy stuff. And it's going through a process. It's not going through, let's try to convince each other of what's going on. It's a process. So we're getting ready to refile the complaint. Okay? Now, what I felt was Sutsui's name, the lieutenant governor, on this decision has profound ramifications because Lieutenant Governor Sutsui is still on the administration. Abercrombie has been succeeded by Ige. So as the two former directors of taxation, but Sutsui is there. So what I did was I set up a meeting with Mike McCartney, the chief of staff for Governor Ige. I met with him on 3 occasions, once a week, 2.5 hours each, up at the governor's executive office in Mike McCartney's room. And my approach there was to explain to him the severity of this situation and do not underestimate what's going on. This is not about a sovereignty movement. We're talking criminal liability. And as the chief of staff, I would hope that you would look into this matter because you better make sure you get some good advice. Because you don't get good advice, people are going to hang. Because these are not little stuff. So I was there to try to help. You know, because this state of Hawaii is actually the Hawaiian Kingdom government from 1893. That's our car. It just got carjacked. Take the driver out, the Queen and the cabinet, replace him with Sanford Dole and his cronies, and tell everybody, force them to sign oaths of allegiance to this new regime with American firepower backing that up. That's where that song, Kalananapua, comes from. So all they did was take over the driver and paint the car red, white, and blue. That's still our car. But we've been led to believe it's not, through denationalization and everything else. So I spoke to Mike, and I have to say, Mike McCartney, he's a good guy. He's a good man. He listens. Now, if we're talking 2.5 hours each meeting, I can assure you, I wasn't the one talking all 2.5 hours. It was going back and forth. And it was getting to the point, how do we fix this problem? In light of what's happening in the courts, in light of what's happening on Mauna Kea, in light of what's going on with the Swiss case, how can we fix it? And there is a way to fix it. There is a way. And I provided that report that lays everything out to Mike. Lay everything out. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. I didn't get any word back. All I saw on TV was they moved ahead against Mauna Kea and Haleakala. And that to me, okay, you disregarded this information. What you just did was you now clearly, I can say, you were made aware before you moved on it. That's called criminal intent. Everybody got to sleep in the bed they made. You still got victims. What's going on here is we are victim-oriented. We're just starting to realize it. And sometimes when you realize you're a victim, sometimes you got to ask yourself, am I a perpetrator? Am I a police officer that's saying I'm doing my job when my job actually doesn't exist because the state of Hawaii is illegal? And whatever I do, there's now a record of a war crime called unlawful confinement. So these kind of things are always coming into play. It's still part of the tangling of the web. But I can tell you from where it was before, 10 years ago, to where it is now, that ball of tangle is not as big as it used to be. It's actually getting smaller. And if you ever were a fisherman, my uncle was a fisherman. Once you hit that right thread or that right suji, rah, that thing just comes apart. I can't predict when that's going to happen, but I can say we got to keep trying to detangle that tangle. And it begins with education, knowledge, and also aloha. Yeah? You know, gotta be. Because we're facing our own people. Gotta be.
One of the guys that I like to quote is Kaleikoa. And he gave an awesome analogy of what is taking place with people here today. And it was a dirty water syndrome. So, Kaleikoa, can you bringing you back in?
And when you say quote, you mean just tonight or all the time? Because usually it's all the time.